Hello everyone. Please note that this is a NotebookLM video presentation. Thank you NotebookLM. Hope you find it useful.
All right, let's dive into some really big questions today, inspired by the work of biologist and complexity theorist Stuart Kauffman. We're going to explore why life itself might represent a world that's, well, beyond physics. And we'll start with a question that sounds incredibly simple, but it's one that physics really struggles to answer.
So let's start with this. Why do human hearts exist? Now, physics can tell you how a heart works, right? The fluid dynamics of blood flow, the electrical signals, all of that. But it can't tell you why a heart exists in the first place. Why this specific, insanely complex arrangement of cells? And that mystery is really what sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about.
You see, classical physics, the world of Newton, it describes reality in a kind of passive voice. Things just happen. Rivers flow, rocks fall, planets orbit. These are all brute, amazing events, but they just occur. There's no purpose, no function, just cause and effect playing out over and over.
But come on, that's not really the world we live in, is it? Our world is filled with doings. We don't just happen to acquire a nectarine, we actively decide to go and buy one. A heart doesn't just accidentally fall into place, an organism works incredibly hard to build it. And this is the fundamental split we need to understand. The world of physics is all about happenings. The world of biology is all about doings. So the big question is, how do we get from one to the other?
For centuries, the answer was basically, hey, the universe is just a giant machine. A massive clockwork that was set in motion at the Big Bang, where every single action is predetermined. It's a really powerful and beautiful idea for sure. But as we're about to find out, this machine has some, let's just say, serious limitations.
Okay, so here's the breaking point. If the universe is a machine, you'd think it could, explore all of its possible configurations. It should be able to make everything it could possibly make, given enough time. But is that actually true?
Let's just take proteins for a second. The basic building blocks of life. A pretty average protein, say 200 amino acids long, has, well, this many possible combinations. That's a 1 with 260 zeros after it. That number is so big it's hard to even wrap your head around. It's way, way larger than all the particles in the entire known universe.
And the implication of that number is just, wow, it's staggering. Think about it this way. If every single particle in the universe had been working nonstop, at the fastest speed possible since the Big Bang, it would still take 10 to the 39th power times the current age of the universe just to make each of those proteins one time. The takeaway here is absolutely mind-blowing. The universe has barely even started to explore what's possible.
Okay, so this leads us to a really important idea. We live in what's called a non-ergodic universe. And that's just a fancy way of saying that the universe can't and won't ever get around to trying out all its possible states. It just can't. Most complex things that could exist, well, they just never will. This isn't some machine methodically exploring all its options. This is a universe where history, pure chance, and random accidents play a massive role in what gets to be real.
And this brings us right back to our original mystery. But now it's way, way deeper, right? In a universe that can only make a tiny, tiny fraction of all the complex things it could make, why on earth do hearts get to exist? Out of this almost infinite sea of things that will never ever be real, why hearts? The answer, well, it's got to be something beyond simple physics.
The secret, it turns out, is in a property that's totally unique to life. Life doesn't just sit there. It actively builds itself.
Think about the difference between a car and a living cell. They're both kind of like machines, right? They both take in energy to do work. But here's the key difference. A car's engine doesn't build a new carburetor for itself. But a cell absolutely does do work to build its own parts. It is literally constructing and maintaining itself from the inside out.
This incredible idea has a name. It's called constraint closure. Basically, it's a system where all the parts, which act as constraints on energy, are doing work that, in turn, builds the very same set of parts. It's like the system is pulling itself up by its own bootstraps for real.
And this cycle here just lays it out perfectly. First, you have these constraints, like enzymes in a cell, and they channel energy to do a specific job. Step 2, that job, that work, is to build new constraints, more enzymes, more cell walls, you name it. And step 3, The system just keeps going, literally constructing and maintaining itself in this incredible self-reinforcing loop. Okay, I know, that's all a little bit abstract. So to make this really hit home, let's turn it into a story. Let's talk about Patrick, a little protocell who changed the world.
So picture this. Patrick is just a simple early life form kind of floating around in some primordial lagoon. And one day, totally by accident, a random mutation makes this little peptide stick out from his side. And this peptide bumps into a rock, and boom, Patrick is stuck. Now, at first glance, that sounds like pretty bad luck, doesn't it?
But here's where it gets interesting. Because he was stuck in one place, all this nutrient-rich water was just flowing past him. Meanwhile, his cousins are just drifting along with the current. Suddenly, Patrick is getting a fire hose of food, while they're just getting a tiny trickle. This wasn't bad luck at all. It was a completely unforeseen opportunity.
And just like that, a whole new way of making a living comes into being. Patrick, purely by chance, just invented a brand new biological role. He wasn't just Patrick anymore. He was Patrick the First, the original Cecil filter feeder. A new function, a new doing, just popped into existence in the universe.
But the story doesn't stop there. Patrick's success creates this dense little colony of life, a Patrick patch. And this patch becomes a brand new feature in the environment, what biologists would call an empty niche. And you know what happens when there's an empty niche? Something evolves to fill it. Enter Rupert the Predator, a totally new protocell that evolved to make a living by eating Patricks. You see, Patrick didn't just survive. His very existence made Rupert's existence possible.
Patrick's story is such a great example because it's not a one-off thing. That sticky peptide, which was a total accident, got repurposed for a brand new job. And this is one of the fundamental principles of how evolution actually works. We see it everywhere, from our tool shed to the deepest parts of our biology.
Just think about a simple screwdriver. Its job, its intended function, is to turn screws. But you can also use it to open a can of paint, or scrape some putty off a window, or wedge a door open, or heck, conduct electricity if you're in a real jam. The list of things you could do with it is basically endless. And here's the most important part. You could never ever write down in advance all of its possible functions because they depend entirely on what crazy situations you might find yourself in down the road.
This is exactly what biologists call an exaptation. It's basically evolution's version of finding a new use for a screwdriver. A trait that evolved for one reason, like, say, feathers evolving to keep a dinosaur warm, gets co-opted for a completely new and unpredictable purpose, like flight. It happens all the time. Fish jaw bones get repurposed for hearing in mammals. Lungs get repurposed into swim bladders in fish. Evolution is the ultimate tinkerer, the master of jury-rigging. And all of this leads us to the core thesis, the big takeaway. If the entire story of life is driven by these unpredictable shifts in function, these new uses for biological screwdrivers, then something really profound has to be true about biology itself. And here's why this is such a game changer. Physics works because you can lay out all the possibilities ahead of time, what scientists call the phase space, and then you apply your laws to it. But with biology, you can never define all the possibilities. There's no way anyone could have predicted that a jawbone would become an ear bone, or that feathers for warmth would lead to soaring eagles. And if you can't even state what can happen, well, then you can't write a law for it. The whole grand dream of reducing biology down to simple physics, it just doesn't work.
So, back to the big question. Is the universe a machine? Well, for planets orbiting and rocks falling, yeah, maybe. But for life, it seems to be something so much more creative, more surprising, more emergent. A world not just of happenings, but of doings. It's not a clockwork that we can just calculate out. It's a world that, as the old Greek philosopher Heraclitus put it, simply bubbles forth.